Hey everyone, just before this podcast starts, this episode is about relationships and will contain discussions of adult subject matter. If you are not interested in hearing those types of discussions, I would suggest you skip this episode. Anyway, let's get into it. Okay, everyone, welcome back to another episode of Christianity on the Spectrum. This is a podcast of about 10 years of ethnographic research on autistic Christians and ex-Christians, where I try to answer all your burning questions about what the very niche and specific population of people who are both autistic and either are or were at one point very seriously religious. And one set of questions that I get a lot is about relationships, and I'll be quite honest with you, I'm not the guy to ask about relationship stuff. I have tangentially acquired a lot of information about specific patterns and behaviors in autistic relationships, but this is not an area that I study. It's not something that I read a lot of literature on. It's not something that I do a lot of analysis on, or really spend much time thinking about outside my own relationship, and so because of that pretty glaring deficiency, I think, in my own set of awareness, I have brought on a fellow autist whose autistic special interest, I think, is dating and relationships. I don't know if that's accurate.
I'd say that's
but it seems like
that's pretty accurate, at least at the moment.
Yeah. Cool. So, do you want to introduce yourself?
Oh yeah, my name's Goblin. I'm Goblin on Twitter. I tweet a lot, and I guess I'm doing YouTube stuff now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Occasionally.
Cool. I'll drop links in the description for this, but yeah. So this will be a fun episode, mostly because Goblin is not a Christian or actively involved in religious sub-communities, which will make this an incredibly interesting episode to her and me, because I'll get to introduce her to concepts like Bible college dating, which I don't think she has much of a grasp on. But yeah. Before we start, I want to make it really clear. In previous episodes, I'm like heavily emphasize the data that I have and the surveys that I've done and the information that I've collected. This has not been an area that I have focused on at all. So this episode is going to be a lot more vibes and a lot more vague. And it's basically just going off information that I have accidentally collected over my research and not something that I've specifically looked into. So I haven't run controls. I haven't done like different types of proper experimentation to make sure that I'm getting everything right. This is a vibes-based episode that has been requested multiple times because people are interested in it. But just take this for what it is. I don't want people to come across with what I'm saying in this episode as being as rigorous as previous episodes. Just want to make that really clear. And the second thing, this is only data collected on either Christian or ex-Christian autistics who are not a representative sample set of the autistic population as a whole. I really need to emphasize that. This is not... It's not the same over in this little niche world. And so don't extrapolate from this onto the broader autistic population, although I'm sure there will be some overlaps. This is purely on autistic Christian subculture in Western English-speaking countries, mostly. Keep that in mind. Also, my data skews really heavily to young people, so heavily skewed under 35, and so there are just going to be some limitations to these things. So, what about autistics over the age of 50 and their relationships? I wish I could tell you, but a lot of cases, the closest I can get is an autistic person under the age of 35 making comments about their autistic dad and their relationship with their mom, which, I mean, is some data, but that's not exactly going to be good quality representative data, because I'm not sure everyone has the best insight into their parents' marriage. So, that being said, take this for what it is. A vibes-based episode where I try to answer the questions that you've given with the best information I have available. So hopefully I made sense there.
Made sense to
Yeah,
me.
cool. I solicited a whole bunch of questions from the audience and in the Discord and on Twitter and over email, and I got a lot, and so I've grouped them into broader questions. So I'm going to start by asking Goblin to guess what she thinks some of these are. The first question is going to be an interesting one. What do you think are the most common pairings of autistic relationships? Pairings specifically meaning autistic and autistic, or autistic and non-autistic, and which genders do you think they're going to be, and which ones? So do you think an autistic relationship is going to be the most common, or like autistic guy, non-autistic girl, non-autistic guy?
Oh God, that's tricky because
Yes,
yeah, the population of autists is not that high, but I feel like we
correct.
find each other. So
We
I'm
do.
kind of tempted to say autistic, but then you hear a lot about women dating autistic men, but also women are underdiagnosed, and I don't know.
Yeah, it is. So it is not an easy question to answer.
Yeah.
So let's break this down into
Hmm.
Okay, do you think women are more likely than men? So autistic women, do you think they are more likely than autistic men to have an autistic partner or a non-autistic partner? If you had to guess,
Oh no, I'm definitely doing
more or less.
statistics wrong because it doesn't. Okay, wait. Okay, let me just go based on no. I shoot. I don't know. I guess maybe I would guess they would be more likely to have an autistic partner than a non-autistic partner.
And why would you guess that? What's your intuition behind that?
Okay, I feel like this is just I'm just bullshitting right now, but something like I feel like autistic men are slept on and autistic women probably have a harder time dating than most people, and so it's just a natural fit where it's like these guys are available for some reason women have not snapped them up. I'm taking that. I expect that happens a lot.
So that might be the case. I don't actually know what the case is. I'll give my guess, but it is so in pairing groups, I have found from my data that if you are an autistic woman, you are more likely to have an autistic partner than if you were a man, more likely to have an autistic partner. It is about 20-ish% of
Mhm.
autistic men have an autistic partner,
Oh wow.
where it's around like 40 to 50% of autistic women who have an autistic
Oh,
partner.
I was also only thinking about heterosexuals and forgetting about the fact that a lot of autistic women are bisexual and will date other autistic women, probably. Yeah.
True.
Okay.
True. Yeah.
Which
So
is
that is another factor in it. It's less of a factor in Christianity though,
got it. Yeah.
because of the homophobia bit.
Checks out. Yeah.
Typically, it's discouraged,
Yeah.
and you don't find as many like practicing Christians in gay relationships than
Mhm.
you do in the general broader autistic population. So there's that. I I have a whole bunch of theories as to why this is. One thing, I think the way that traditional gender roles are set up. So traditional gender roles tend to have a weird autistic people have a really weird relationship with them in
I can
that
imagine.
these sort of I in my gender and sexuality episodes I talked about how the sort of default way that autistic people think about gender and gender roles is default meritocratic egalitarian, and so it's a sort of idea of just do whatever makes sense, and what we should do is whoever's most qualified to do things. And so that's the overall idea, and it often happens that the traditional gender roles and expectations that are placed on men, autistic men fit those a lot better than autistic women, especially when you're in like more socially conservative contexts. That means more non-autistic women are going to be interested in some autistic men. Especially, I've found, so a really common pairing, and I'm in this pairing, and many people like me are in this pairing, are autistic male engineer, non-autistic female, high executive function, high emotional support
Okay.
career.
Yeah, yeah,
So
division of labor. Mhm.
engineers and early childhood education workers, social workers, basically people who have really good social skills, really high social awareness and social empathy, and are in places where these things are more value. And they will typically, so that pairing is probably the most common pairing that I see
Interesting.
in autistic Christian men. Is they will find like my family jokes that I married my social worker. Yeah, but you find that pairing all the time, and it is probably one of the most common pairings that I find in men. But
Interesting.
that same pairing doesn't quite exist in when you flip the traditional
Mm.
gender roles, right?
Mhm.
So there isn't sort of like caring, nurturing ideal that's placed on men, where that is placed on women. And so that sort of naturally fits well with autistic men in a way that it doesn't quite as easily
Yeah.
naturally fit with autistic women. So there's also a fairly big factor of autistic women simply don't really tend not to fit really well into traditional gender roles that are foisted on them, especially in more socially conservative settings. And if you are a guy and you are looking for your like dream trad wife, she's probably not autistic, right?
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
it's the reality. And so if you're looking for a trad husband, that trad husband could very well be autistic. But if you're looking for your trad wife pairing, that trad wife probably isn't autistic. Um,
Yeah, that makes
the,
sense.
the, there are many things, and so who will go for those types of women? Other autistic men. So I thought that explains why it's more common.
Mm.
There's also another factor, which is what about not autism and instead neurodivergence as a whole? So, like,
Mm.
what percentage of autistic people have a spouse who has some sort of common co-occurring neurodivergent condition or meets the criteria? Do you know what the term broad autism phenotype is?
Yes.
Yes. So so like, or like a candidate for broad autism phenotype.
Oh, okay. I mean, if we're counting that, I would have to. Ah, God, I don't know. I underestimate how many normies are in the world, though, because no offense,
That's fair.
normies are lovely, but I just surround myself with people with various neurodivergent traits at minimum, so it's hard for me to imagine. I don't know. There's so many like comorbid conditions, right? And so much overlap, like ADHD and all that shit. And ADHD is like hugely popular, but I wonder if I might expect the pattern to hold though, where it's like the guy is the one with the neurodivergence. I'm not sure.
Yeah, so typically autistic women, if they're dating a man who isn't autistic, he is likely a candidate for some other form of
Okay,
neurodivergence or some other co-occurring
yeah.
neurodivergence. It is rare for me to find a woman in my data set who isn't dating a
Wow.
guy who is some form of neurodivergent. It is more common in men though to be dating a woman who's just like a super normie.
Okay.
That being said, from the older women that I've interviewed, a lot of them will have a more normal spouse than people under the age of 35. And that's mostly for something we'll talk about later, which I think is meeting and how people meet each other.
Oh, okay.
Whereas previously, like how most people over the age of 40 that I know who are autistic met, it's through university or in high school.
Oh,
And
wow. Okay.
very early on, they meet each other and they pair off, and it's just you're more likely to collide with a normie in that
Yeah,
space
yeah.
than you are with an
No
autist.
filtering. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, the other thing that I found, one of a really common pairing for autistic women is to date men who aren't from their same culture.
Oh.
So
Oh.
I found that to be a lot more common, in which they'll date a man who isn't from the place that they're from, and
Interesting.
that is largely because their spouse doesn't have the same sort of expectations of them that other people from their culture do, and they can pass a lot of the sort of eccentricities and weirdness of their relationship off as like a cultural clash and cultural differences and things like that. But yeah, so I found that's pretty common as
This is
well.
a bit of a tangent, but you might have data on this. Somebody on Twitter was speculating that immigrants are disproportionately autistic, like basically for the same reason. Like going to another country, you're a lot less weird if there's a reason for you being weird.
Yes, so I don't know I don't know immigration stats, right?
Yeah.
And like I have no idea. And a
Okay.
lot of immigration is contingent on like economic factors and
Yeah.
like very, if there's a war in a country or something like that, there'll be higher immigration out of that country to other neighboring countries. And so immigration gets a lot more complicated. However, a lot of autistic people that I know who have moved to different countries have said that their quality of life has significantly increased once they moved.
Oh
And
no.
it significantly increased because everyone writes off their autism eccentricities as just, oh, he's foreign. Of course he's acting like that.
That's
It,
fucking amazing.
yeah, it's something I've heard an awful lot of. And yeah, but I don't know proportions. I
Yeah.
would expect that if you look at like specifically H-1B visas for tech companies, that would be
Yeah, yeah.
disproportionately autistic. But that has less to do with them being immigrants and more
That's
to
fair.
do with the field of work that they're
Yeah,
working in.
yeah.
But that's mostly speculation. However, the sort of autistic person living in a foreign context and in a foreign country is like a pretty well established thing where most people that, and the more different the culture is, the more you feel ingrained
Yeah.
with it, or like better, the less pressure you feel. So if you go from Canada to England or Canada to America, it's not going to be that big of a difference.
Yeah.
However, if you go from Canada to Norway, or like Canada to Germany, I know a lot of autistic people who've moved to Germany and been like, this is the place for me.
I have a friend he's doing some work over there right now and has been telling me about how autistic everybody is. The culture is just, it sounds fantastic.
Yeah. One of my favorite stats about my research that I know I can show is that the most autistic denomination are Lutherans. If I presented, the most autistic denomination are the Lutherans, which I will never not find funny.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So yeah, the German genes really doing us a solid. I've often joked that like when you get an autism diagnosis, you should get like a birthright trip to Germany or like Finland to go see your people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And probably also sign up for your local Lutheran church, or I guess you don't sign up for church, but just start showing up.
You can just show up. Yeah. But so I found those types of pairings are pretty common with autistic people with foreign spouses. That happens quite a bit. Happens more with women than with men. I'm not sure why. Overall, another thing that I've noticed is, so do you know what the term complementarianism is?
Oh God, I don't think I do.
Okay, so within Christian circles, there are these raging debates about two different styles of relationship: complementarian and egalitarian. Okay. So egalitarian is what you would describe a relationship in which both spouses are equal and they just do whatever makes sense. And then complementarianism is, have you seen like the umbrella diagram before? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't think I have. Wait.
Okay, so there's this umbrella diagram and it has the top umbrella, which is Jesus. And then there's a bottom umbrella underneath it, which is like the father. And then beneath it is the mother. And beneath that is the children. Yeah. Which doesn't make sense, right? Because it's an umbrella. You don't layer umbrellas underneath each other.
Yeah, not the best choice. Really.
Like it doesn't. Anyway, the whole idea is like male headship. And like the man is the one who makes the decisions, sort of like traditional patriarchal relationship structure that you might think of, like the trad wives that you see on Instagram are that. Okay. Yeah. And so generally speaking, I found that the number of autistic women who are interested in complementarian relationships is near zero. Like
wow, interesting.
It's very low. It's very low. And it's very interesting because that is in Christian circles, where you would expect it to be the highest. For men, it's a bit higher, but overall, in general, autistic relationships and the type of relationship that autistic people tend to want are egalitarian relationships.
But it's such a clear structure. It feels like...
It is, but it's a bad structure that gets imposed on you.
Yeah.
If you don't want something to happen, you have to just go along with what your husband says, right?
I wonder if non-Christian autistic women are like weirdly more down for that than you would expect.
I have not found that to be the case.
Okay.
I have found basically generally across the board, if you look at complementarian and egalitarian structures, generally speaking, they want egalitarian
Okay.
structures where they have a say. Now,
Yeah.
when it comes to various different ideals and ideas, that's where things like traditional gender roles, for example, is different than complementarian.
Okay.
So you can be egalitarian and still have like a traditional gender role system. My wife and I would have an egalitarian relationship, but she stays home with our child, and she's not working because she doesn't really want to at this moment. She wanted to raise our child until she was at least 2 by
Nice.
herself, and so we typically have a very traditional gender role structure. Like if you just measured it from the outside, it would look very traditional gender role-y, but that's mostly just because that's just what makes sense for us. She's a nurse and has really high executive function and likes things in particular ways, and I am a workaholic engineer who spends most of his time at work, and when not doing work, doing some other form of work. And so it like happens that the tasks that we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis happen to fall into that structure. And so there's a difference between preferences for traditional gender roles and complementarianism. In complementarianism, it's explicitly like the husband's will is what guides the wife, and the wife's job is to submit to the husband's will.
Yeah, right.
And so generally speaking, autistic women are not into that.
That's fair. It does seem like if you are picking the husband, this is less bad, but
yeah, but again, why would you pick someone
yeah.
like that instead of just picking someone who you can cooperate
right.
with? It's like, would you rather be ordered to do something or cooperate with someone to make a decision? And generally speaking, cooperation is preferred.
I tend to agree. I'm trying to like play devil's advocate with myself, maybe because I've been reading too much Ayn Rand lately. Though I wouldn't say she's a complementarian either, but there's something about, I feel like having the option to submit, I feel is something that women are down for. They just don't want to have to. And it sounds like maybe complementarianism you have to.
Yeah, but so the difference between that is submitting if you want to versus you don't have a choice whether you submit. You will.
I just can't wrap my head around that at all.
Yeah, no, and like it's having to explain like hardcore traditionalist Christian conservative sexual ethics to autistic women who aren't in. They like typically can't wrap their head around it, and they're like, what the hell?
I grew up with some degree of this stuff, but I was still in a like pretty progressive, Catholic environment, so it was more it's still pretty alien.
Yeah, it can be pretty intense. It's like, you live like that, that's wild. Those are the most common pairings and the most common pairing types that I see. Any other things you can think of about pairings and pairing types?
Okay, I've got a couple of questions. When you said often autistic women will pair up with a man from a different culture, is this typically people from another country fully, or is it more, does it also extend to things like, I don't know, like different class or different, I guess, like culture within their own country?
It's typically culture outside of your country.
Okay.
So a very common thing is meeting someone in university who's from another culture. That's the one that I think is probably the most common, is meeting someone from another culture, and that person is at university and they don't realize you're weird because they think everything's weird. So they can put up with your autistic eccentricities.
Amazing. Okay, and then the other thing I was wondering about is, have you found that, do you know whether any of these pairings tend to be more functional than others?
Yeah, so there are many success cases and failures, and it really depends on a lot of things. And so this is probably a good time to just get into what works and what doesn't. Hey everyone, if you are enjoying this podcast and you want to support my work or podcast, you can do this in 2 ways. The first way is by engaging with this podcast on social media. If you're listening on YouTube, you can like, comment, and subscribe, which helps boost the podcast through the algorithm and show it to more people who might be interested in this type of content. If you're on Spotify, you can rate the podcast and leave comments, which also helps boost the podcast. And if you're on iTunes or any other app, you can rate the podcast and leave a review. Doing this really helps tell these platforms that my podcast is good and worth listening to, and will help tell the algorithms to promote my podcast to more people. A lot of people have also been asking if they could financially support my research work or podcast, or encourage me to continue doing this work that a lot of autistic people find valuable. If my work has been helpful to you, and you have the means to do so, I would appreciate if you would make a single donation or sign up for recurring monthly donations to the Against Malaria Foundation. I've provided a link in the description that will get you to the donation page that will donate on behalf of this podcast and give me a message telling me that you've donated. The Against Malaria Foundation has been rated by GiveWell as one of the most efficient charities for reducing suffering and harm in this world by providing malaria nets to people who need them. Dollar for dollar, this is one of the best ways to donate to charity, and it helps reduce a lot of needless suffering in our world. Even small donations can make a big difference. Each net costs about $2 and lasts for 3 to 4 years. For every 600 nets that are bought, it saves on average one child and prevents between 500 to 1,000 cases of malaria. If you have the means to do so, please consider donating through the link in the description, as it helps motivate me knowing that I have some tangible number that I can point to say this is actually helping people. Anyway, that's it. Back to the podcast. What do you think the biggest number one factor in whether an autistic pairing will work is?
Oh no, now I'm totally blanking. Okay, what the first place my head goes is often autists are pretty rigid in their preferences, and if you run into some like really intense differences there, which I mean there are a lot of preferences that could easily be deal breakers. I could anticipate stuff like this, but I don't know. I can imagine preferences around sex, maybe, especially if you're dealing with Christian autists, but or like touching in general. I'm not sure. No, I don't know. I'm blanking.
So the
All
biggest
right.
factor,
Yeah.
the biggest factor is, do you know you're autistic?
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yes. Do you know you're autistic, and does your partner know what that means?
Okay.
The biggest factor I've found is that, and one really interesting thing that commonly comes up in a lot of my interviews and just like reading autistic stories about themselves, is their marriage was kind of going downhill and deteriorating pretty quickly. And in that process, they were going to therapy. And in therapy, their therapist said, you probably have autism, right?
Holy shit.
And they go, no, I had no idea. What are you talking about? And they introduce this to them, or they go for an assessment for something, and it comes back that they're autistic. And then they go through a 6-month period of adjustment and readjustment. And then all of a sudden their marriage starts getting better, because now both of them know what's going on.
Yeah.
And why it's going on, and they have a way to explain it, and now they have words to communicate the difficulties that they're having that they didn't even know were having sensory issues, like not even knowing that you have sensory issues, just knowing that you get really pissed off for some reason, but now being like, oh, I get really pissed off because I'm having a sensory meltdown, and oh, I could just remove myself from the situation before it starts getting worse. And that type of thing is one of the biggest indicators of success. And then whether or not your partner is on board with it, like whether or not they believe autism is real. This does come up quite a few times. It especially happens in conservative Christian couples where the woman discovers she's autistic and she's married to a non-autistic man.
Oh, yeah.
Or she's married to an undiagnosed autistic man who refuses to accept that he's also autistic. And they'll be like, no, you don't actually have autism. This isn't real. That typically makes things very bad. But the thing that tends to make things more successful more quickly is, do they know that their partner has autism, and does the partner know that they have autism? There are just so many things. Like you mentioned a whole bunch of them: rigidity, touch sensitivity, sexual preferences. All these things are pretty heavily mediated and affected by autism. And a lot of wives of autistic men will talk about how they're touch starved, and they try to touch their husband and their husband recoils from them, and they're like, oh, he must not like me, he must
Yeah,
not
yeah.
find me attractive. And it's like, no, your husband has autism and doesn't like being touched. This is nothing about you, this is him. And so things like that come up so often, and it's never one issue, right? It's always a cluster of issues, and often those clusters of issues are related to autism.
Checks out.
And
Is
so
this?
knowing that that's a factor is really big
Yeah, that
in
makes.
determining success.
I think this actually happened when I got diagnosed with autism. I told my dad and my stepmom about it, and then she, I guess, did some research, or maybe I talked to her a bit about it. And a few months later, she came back. She's like, "So my marriage has been improving because I realized that your dad is autistic."
Yep.
And it's just like, holy shit. She's like looking up Reddit posts and stuff on meltdowns and all of this. It's just like it explains so much.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that is a very common trope. And that is something that I have found in, like, for late diagnosed autistic people. It's one thing that greatly improves the quality of their marriage is learning that they have autism, and then
Nice.
their partner learning about autism. And that usually has like a marked improvement on their life and on their marriage and on their relationship.
Is this also true when both partners are autistic?
Yes.
Makes sense.
If they figure it out.
Yeah, I guess
Like,
I would
they're-
imagine, or I would expect it to be more dramatic if one partner isn't autistic. But I've even noticed in my relationship where I'm pretty sure my partner is autistic, and there are some things where I'll be I'll sometimes feel like the women on the like the neurotypical women on Reddit who are like complaining about their autist husbands. Then I realize, wait, what the fuck? That's obviously what's happening. I don't know why I like couldn't put it together.
Yeah, and it really depends. And there are lots of additional issues that come out with like Christian cultures, especially more conservative Christian cultures, where there's like a skepticism of autism and mental health, and more specifically high functioning autism being a real thing, because it's basically like the only autism that exists is ASD3, and if you don't have it, then you're fine and you're just complaining, and this is just a personality type and you need to get over it type of attitude. Or it's insulting that you think you're actually autistic when there are all these people who are worse off than you. You're fine, you're just sensitive. Those types of attitudes, which are deeply unhelpful and typically don't lead to good outcomes with your spouse.
Shocking.
Yes. Who would have known that intentionally maintaining ignorance about your spouse and their neurological conditions would have an effect on your relationship and the happiness of your wife? Who could have predicted?
Wild.
Yeah. So communication is a really big point of friction in a lot of autistic relationships, especially autistic and non-autistic pairings. It's a big point of friction, and it's especially a big point of friction if they don't know they're autistic, because like being like, why don't you know that I'm mad at you right now? Why don't you know that? And like, why do you think I'm sad when I'm not sad? I'm just, there's not much going on here. And things like that.
I can imagine a lot of theory of mind issues too. Is this a thing?
Yeah, so theory of mind, very controversial topic in autism. Do autistic people have theory of mind deficit? We'll never know. The ghost of Simon Baron Cohen screaming in the background, once again being vindicated.
I just know in my own relationship, like sometimes my boyfriend will just forget that he hasn't told me things, which I realize sounds like a very normal thing, but it's like to a degree where it's like, I think it's like some part of him thinks that we have telepathy going on.
Yeah,
and
so I have that really badly. So I had a lab rat phase in my 20s where I basically signed up for every single autism study I could.
Hell yeah, I've been doing that.
They put me through like batteries of tests for like theory of mind deficits and things like that. And I have, if you give me 5 seconds, I can figure it out and I can score on par with everyone else. But under 5 seconds, I'm just like really bad at it, and really bad at intuitively, spontaneously doing it. Basically, in order to do it, I have to stop and think. And so I often think my wife knows so much more. And she's always like, John, we've never had this conversation before. Why did you think I knew this? I was
I
like,
have
what do
this
you...
interaction with my boyfriend all the time. Like, luckily, it hasn't been anything like upsetting, and I figured out what was going
Yeah,
on before we could run into any problems. But I could totally imagine like a neurotypical person encountering this, not knowing what it is, and thinking that they're like being lied to. It's like,
yeah.
oh, like your boyfriend didn't say what time he was coming home, and he came home like really late or whatever because he thought he told you, like that type of shit.
Another problem is the boyfriend getting mad at the girl, like the autistic boyfriend getting mad at the girlfriend because he thinks that she knows something and she's just
Yeah,
being obtuse.
yeah, yeah.
So that also happens a lot. But yeah, the biggest issues with autistic, non-autistic pairings are just like incompatible communication
Yeah.
strategies. Now, a common topic that I bring up on this podcast a lot is the idea of competing autisms. Do you intuitively understand what that means?
Okay, I don't know if this is right, but I'm imagining like an extreme version would be like one person is really sensory seeking and one person is really hypersensitive or
Yes.
whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there are autistic communication styles in which you are very upfront, aggressive, just say things to people's faces. And then there's another that's like extremely hyper emotionally sensitive and really poorly responds to directness,
Okay, yeah.
things like that. And people ask me what happens in those pairings. What happens is they break up very quickly and they don't get married. The relationship ends pretty quick. That's typically what happens. Other factors that often affect autistic marriages and autistic long-term relationships are mental health issues that autistic people have. So autistic people disproportionately have suicidal thoughts, suicidal ideation. That can be pretty hard on the partner who doesn't have it. High rates of depression, high rates of anxiety, lots of things like this that are just really difficult to navigate and really difficult to watch your partner going through. That can have a lot of stress. It's especially common in men for them to self-medicate with alcohol
Yep.
or video games or some sort of, not that like alcohol and video games are the same level of bad or anything like
Yeah,
that,
sure.
but you know, instead of talking to you, he'll play WoW for 8 hours, which is not ideal in developing consistent and good communication patterns with your spouse. So like those cases come where that happens a lot. I went through a phase like 5 or 6 years ago where all I did was read books about autistic relationships, like memoirs of autistic relationships,
Oh, whoa.
and memoirs from the non-autistic wives of autistic husbands. Just how much deep-seated resentment goes through all of those, and being like, autism will destroy your marriage. It is a curse from God that's going to kill you.
Jesus Christ.
Oh yeah, there are a lot of
Oh boy,
those.
all right.
And a lot of them are because a lot of these autistic men either don't know they're autistic or know they're autistic and don't really care about the effects that has on the people around them, and or know they're autistic and are like, it's bad for me to pretend that I'm not something that I genuinely am, and so I'm kind of going to be an asshole
Yeah.
because that's my autism. And like a lot of it is just like genuinely unhealthy coping mechanisms that they develop. And so reading those memoirs or whatever is kind of a wild ride. Makes you pessimistic as an autistic person in a relationship with a non-autistic woman.
Oh,
That
yeah.
to be like, you still like me, right? To my wife all the time, and she'd, yes, I like you. And then for a while, those books made me super paranoid because what if I'm doing something wrong? And then I came to the conclusion that all of my wife's best friends are autistic women who are
Oh.
very similar to me. And I realized, oh no, you actually like people like me because all your friends that you voluntarily associate with are basically female versions of me. Okay, we're fine here.
Wait, that's super interesting. I think I have assumed when people have a bunch of friends who are autistic that they're also autistic and that's why that's happening. Is there just like a type of neurotypical who is into this for some
Yes.
reason?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah. So there are, I jokingly call them like super nannies.
Super nannies.
Because it's like a term that was used in Silicon Valley for a bunch of tech companies, where they would get a whole bunch of autistic or close to autistic programmers, and they weren't very good at managing their time, executive function, all those things. And so they would hire elementary school teachers, social workers,
Wait, really?
nurses. Yeah.
What?
and bring them in. Yeah, they're called super nannies.
Wait, that's genius, though.
There are all these case studies about these basically high executive function women who don't understand tech, whose only job is to basically organize and coordinate the schedules of these people and make sure everyone's getting along, make sure they're eating, that type of thing.
That's
And
basically a trad wife, but who gets to go to work with you, huh?
yeah, it's like a trad wife, your work trad wife, if you will. You know, you had a work wife, now you have a work trad
I would get
wife.
so jealous.
But yeah, so there is a type of non-autistic woman. So my wife is like hyper empathetic, and she's one of those women who growing up never had a favorite toy, because if she had a favorite toy, she was worried about how the other toys would feel.
That's so cute.
And always playing with, making sure she equally played with all her toys so that none of them felt left out, and would get really stressed when she'd get a new toy for Christmas or a birthday, because it meant she had to take care of it and manage its feelings. And so I joke that my wife collects broken toys and just brings them all together and plays with them.
That's so charming.
But yeah, so there are neurotypical women like that, and they tend to marry autistic men.
I believe that.
Yeah,
that's where the alpha is.
Yeah. It's where you get all the things you need, and they get all the things they need. It's a really common pairing for especially autistic Christian couples.
Interesting.
Because they'll meet at Bible college.
Oh, whoa, yeah, wait, okay, so you need to explain what Bible...
Do you know what Bible college is?
No.
Okay, so imagine a university, but the university is unaccredited, and the entire purpose is to meet your spouse. I'm sort of joking.
Wait, that kind of rules, actually. That's sort of what I was hoping college would be, like normal college.
So the joke in a lot of Bible colleges is ring by spring or your money back.
Holy shit.
Yeah. So it's not actually for that. A lot of men go there to train to become pastors or work in the church or become missionaries or work in the field or take a degree in theology or something like that. And a lot of women also go to do those things. Okay. But there's a joke that many of them are there for an MRS degree.
Okay,
like a Mrs. degree.
I'm familiar with that. Wait,
yeah.
Is this just a Protestant thing then? Or do they have some... Catholic...
So it is mostly a Protestant thing, but there are also like Catholic universities, but they tend to be Catholic universities.
Like actually, yeah.
But Bible colleges specifically are mostly Protestant, and it is really funny if you look at the marketing material for these places, because all the men, it'll just be like standard men, but the women, they will always make sure that you can see their left hand, and it'll have a ring on it.
Wait, what?
Yeah, it is really unsubtle.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and so a lot of these women, so my wife did a year at Bible college, and a lot of them will only do a year at Bible college and then go off to do the rest. So my wife did a year at a Bible college, did all her English and social studies and courses like that you needed for nursing, and then went off and did her nursing degree. I always joke there must have been something wrong with her because she didn't get married after a year of Bible college. Like,
lucky you.
Effective. No, we were talking a lot during her Bible college.
Okay. So you already knew each other. Yeah.
Yeah, we knew each other in high school.
Oh, nice.
And then we started talking to each other a lot when I went to military college and she went to Bible college, and then started officially long distance dating for 4 years. After that. Yeah.
Wait, is this a thing that autists are better at than neurotypicals, do you know?
Yes.
Long distance dating?
It is. So a huge thing that I see from a lot of autistic people is their dating preferences. There's a huge dating preference for like online communication via text. So like chat rooms and things like that. Apparently, OkCupid or one of these dating apps, I forget which one it is, had a text only version of the dating app, and a lot of autistic women said they really preferred that.
Wait, as opposed to what, like with photographs of them?
Yeah, and it was basically just like a chat room. A really big thing that I see a lot of when I ask people how did you meet, they met through MMORPGs.
Oh shit, interesting.
So, I often joke that World of Warcraft causes autism.
I've heard this.
Because autistic people will meet each other and then get married and have children.
Hell yeah.
And I have talked to around 40 different people who met their spouse through an MMORPG.
Oh shit. I
Yeah,
gotta start recommending that to people.
I wouldn't recommend it unless you... Here's the thing. If you're playing an MMORPG already, great. Don't use them as dating apps. People will get mad at you for sucking at raids or something. But yeah, so especially autistic women, it's far more common for autistic women to meet their spouses through playing online video games.
That makes sense.
Than it is for autistic men, just because the proportions are wildly skewed towards, right? Women will have a select 30 different guys in their clan, where the guys, there'll be the one girl, and so they basically find the autist that's most compatible with them and end up dating them long distance and then getting married. Like, huge amounts of people that I talk to also meet each other through social media and just interacting with the same things or going to conferences or conventions. So very common thing in the Christian world are like, they're all over the world. It's fairly common for Christian churches to hold conventions, like apologetics conventions, where you get together to talk about arguments for why God exists or whatever. And a lot of autistic couples will meet their spouses there. Because fun. Like, what type of woman goes to a convention, to an apologetics convention about like how to prove that Jesus is really God? Like,
nope, that checks out.
There's one type of woman that does that, and she has autism. Or going into in-depth analysis of C.S. Lewis. Like, there's a certain type of girl that's interested in going to a convention dedicated to just talking about C.S. Lewis for a weekend, and that girl has autism.
Yeah, completely makes sense.
Yeah, so that happens a lot, but the vast majority of couples that or people in long-term relationships that I've talked to have met online or through some sort of online event. And that's, again, because most of my data is skewed to under the age of 35, and that's just where autistic people tend to be.
Yep.
And then they meet each other, and then they agree to start dating, and then they do. Christians tend to get married pretty quickly. So I know a lot of people complain about men not wanting to settle down, but in Christianity, it is a sin to have sex before marriage. And so many Christian couples, it's pretty normal to get married pretty quickly. Like year-long dating, 6-month engagement, then getting married is pretty common. For the types of people that I tend to talk to. Autistic people, I have noticed, will often tend to have much shorter marriage and relationship timelines. Autistic Christians, I should say, tend to get married much faster than their non-autistic peers.
Interesting.
They will date for shorter periods of time, they will get engaged sooner, and they will get married sooner.
What accounts for that, do you think?
Yeah, so lots of things. I think one of the biggest things is a lot of us go through a lot of social isolation and not having friends. And then all of a sudden it's like, wow, I've got a friend. Not only do I have a friend, I'm sexually attracted to this friend. And I want to be with them. And it makes sense. And a lot of the things that prevent people from committing to relationships often aren't quite there for autistic people. A lot of the dangers or what if or the think of the consequences are like, no, this makes sense. I'm going to be with this person. I like this person. Why wait for another 6 months? And so it is, I've met quite a few couples who like met online, dated for 6 months, long distance, got engaged, and then got married within a year. It is not, Sometimes those relationships don't work out very well. Oftentimes they do, though. So I have not found a correlation between dating or courtship, whatever you want to call the pre-marriage period. I have not noticed a correlation between satisfied marriages and length of time, unless maybe that length of time is like 2 weeks. But there are not. I know one person who got engaged within 2 weeks of meeting their spouse.
Impressive.
Yeah, they were surprisingly they were both autistic, and they were just like, this makes sense, let's do it. And they've got 5 kids and
holy shit,
seem happy. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess I imagine non-Christian autistics take a lot longer, but mostly it's because there's no particular framework. They're probably like the framework that has been handed to us by the neurotypicals is kind of lame.
Yeah, and there's no like cultural pressure,
Yeah.
where there's a huge cultural pressure within Christianity to get married quickly. If you start living with your boyfriend or girlfriend,
Yeah.
in a lot of Christian contexts, that's like you might as well have left the faith altogether. Like that is
Damn.
akin to apostasy in many places, and so
Okay.
there are just significantly more pressures to just get it over with and get married.
Mm.
Um, Another thing I've noticed: massive preference to small weddings.
Yeah, I buy
um,
that.
yeah, almost everyone I've talked to was like, I had a small wedding, or courthouse weddings
Mhm.
are a lot more common with the autistic people, with the autistic couples that I've talked to, where it's much more common for me to talk to an autistic couple than like any of the normal couples that I know in my life, and they will say, "Oh yeah, we just had we had a small ceremony, or we got married in a courthouse and then got married in front of a priest, and that was it. Had a
Mm.
witness there, and that was all." Mostly because a lot of people just don't like the ceremony and the pageantry and aren't
Yeah.
really into that. And yeah, so that's another thing.
Seems like it
Uh,
also takes a huge amount of executive function to pull off every
yes,
aspect of a wedding.
it does, and they're just not interested in doing that, and they're like, why would I do that? Like, the whole point of getting married is so we can live together and have sex. That's the purpose. That's why we're doing
That's
this.
so good. That's so funny.
Why do I need to plan
Yeah.
a huge catering gig? This is stupid. I shouldn't need to do this in order to live with my wife or to live with my husband.
That
So
makes sense to me.
that happens a lot. A lot of them express how they wish they could have got a courthouse marriage, or they wish they would have had a really small wedding if they
Oh,
didn't,
interesting. Okay.
or how much they didn't enjoy their wedding is
Okay.
pretty common, or how stressful it was, and how much they wish they could have just forgone the whole thing. That's pretty common. Final point on how people meet: if they don't meet online, the most common place is in college. Meeting people in college is probably the next most common way I see people meet, and so yeah, that's basically how and why, and marriage and stuff like that. Any questions on that type of thing?
Let's see. Not that I can think of. I'm trying to think if there's anything I'm forgetting. I've been taking notes and trying to write down questions as I go. Yeah, this feels like one where they're going to differ substantially from neurotypical, or not neurotypical, from non-Christian or like non-religious autists, I think. Because it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
yeah, without that
I
pressure to get married, it gets weird, I
Yeah,
think.
I have noticed that. So when you're looking at the non-autistic people, or like, I've talked to a lot of ex-Christians, so people who have left Christianity and are no longer Christian, and they have very different timelines for relationships. A lot of them don't like the idea of marriage, or think it's bad, or are just like, I don't need institutional approval for my relationship. This is
Yeah.
weird.
I
Why
went
am
through
I
that
doing
phase.
this?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's
Oh,
really
okay.
common. It's not very common for religious ones, though, because if you want to have sexual relations, you need to seal the deal with marriage first.
Do you know if autistics tend to be more rule following in this respect than non-autistics?
Uh,
Like in terms of
yes,
avoiding sex before marriage? Okay,
yes.
interesting.
So typically they are a lot more rule following than their non-autistic counterparts. They take it quite seriously, and will typically be that way. Yeah, it sort of gets drilled into you, and a lot of autistic people have religious OCD, and
I believe that.
so
Yep.
so you get religious OCD mixed with, oh, you had premarital sex. Okay, now your whole relationship is going to burn and be destroyed, and you will suffer because of this. And so those types of thoughts and those types of ideas tend to
Okay.
have a stronger dampening effect than when you look at non-autistic
Yeah.
couples. I don't know of any Christian autistic couple that I've surveyed or found. Maybe I found one and I just can't remember, who were practicing Christians who got pregnant out of wedlock.
Oh wow, that's
So I
impressive.
don't know. I definitely haven't interviewed any of them. I
Okay.
haven't, on the surveys where I asked questions like that. The only ones who were pregnant before they got married weren't Christian at the time. And I'm trying to think if I like have found any online, and I can't think of any.
Now I'm wondering if
Like
autistic.
so barring sexual assault, but that's like a
Sure.
different category that's not really in the same
Mm.
vein. But yeah, I'm sure it happens. It is probably at a much lower prevalence than in the general population.
I believe it. I'm kind of curious whether autistics are more scrupulous about their use of birth control as well. Follow the directions a little better. I don't know.
Yes. So as many people know, birth control, it's a sin if you're Catholic. Protestants were cool with it,
Oh,
mostly.
interesting.
Yeah. So Protestants, birth control is fine.
Mm.
A lot of autistic women who are converting to Christianity will convert to a Protestant form of Christianity because they are wildly unenthusiastic about the idea of not being able to have birth control.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so within Protestantism, there's like Anglicanism, which is close enough to Catholicism for many autistic people, but Anglicans are for the most part cool with birth control. There are some Anglicans who aren't cool with birth control, but most Anglicans are fine with birth control. And so when you're looking at adult female conversions, a lot of them will convert to Anglicanism, not solely because of birth control. That's never, but they will often mention like, this steered me away from converting to Catholicism because I knew I wouldn't be able to take birth control, and being pregnant freaks me out. Don't want that in my life. Don't want kids. Don't want to have to deal with that. And do you know what NFP is?
No, I don't think so.
Natural family planning.
Oh, is this like the ovulation calendar type of thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you time sex so that it's not on the the time that you're ovulating.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So a lot of autistic women really big into NFP. If you look at like a lot of the NFP heads out there and the NFP coaches and
what?
Yeah. So a big thing for especially autistic Catholic women to do is they have their sort of traditional marriage, and then they have to find something to do, and they often get really interested in NFP and like doula, early child care education, like raising infants and things like that. And so a lot of autistic women are like super into NFP and super interested in it. However, there's also a huge contingent of anti-NFP autistic women, which is also very funny because they're like, NFP has a lot of things in it, right? And one of them is you can only have sex at certain times, and those times, generally speaking, aren't favorable for women, like or whatever. I'm not an NFP guy. Don't come at me, NFP autists.
My limited understanding, though, is that when you're most likely to get pregnant is when you're most likely to become horny. Like,
yeah. And so when you're least likely to become pregnant, that's when you're supposed to be doing it. And they're like, this doesn't make sense. Like, this sucks for women. and there are all sorts of pro and anti NFP autistic women out there, and it is a whole thing because like NFP using birth control and religious scrupulosity. Name a more iconic duo between autistic women with religious scrupulosity and the desire to not use birth control, and specifically link that to all sorts of bad things. And so there's this meme that I've talked about a bunch on my podcast about how autistic people have this strong sense of social justice. And it's like, okay, so that is sort of true. But it's true in the sense in that some autistic women are super pro-life, and pro-life in a way that's like, that is their social justice.
Yeah, sure.
So their social justice activism isn't progressive social justice activism. It's pro-life activism. And that's heavily tied. And a lot of people who are pro-life, especially if they're Catholic, are super anti-birth control. And so, anyway, so these things are linked, and there are opinions, to put it mildly.
Yeah, I can imagine. Oh. Okay,
Yep.
so
Yep. A lot of autistic women also like, I mean, women in general don't enjoy pregnancy. It's not a particularly enjoyable experience for most.
yeah.
A lot of autistic women really don't enjoy it, and so you have a lot of combinations of women who are really against birth control but really don't want to have kids.
Mm.
And they're in this really weird bind. They're not sure how to escape it and be like, I have one child and I am dying here, and I do not think I could have another one without being fully dead.
God, is this like in
Also,
part
if I
just
use birth control, this is of the devil,
yeah?
and we can't do this at all.
Is
um,
it the child rearing that's also very difficult because like loud noises and no ability to control your environment and that type of thing?
loud noises, no ability to control your environment. If you're breastfeeding, you
Mhm.
all of a
Oh yeah.
sudden are wet, and you
Oh
don't like
no.
being wet. That's
Yeah.
a very common complaint that
Mhm.
autistic women will tell me.
That's so funny, so specific.
Yeah, sleep deprivation, like
Yeah.
lots of deprivation. Child is screaming. You can't reason with children, especially infants,
Yeah.
right? And
Mhm.
if you're like, just do the logical thing, and your toddler's like, what if I eat stickers? Well, what if that's my thing, is eating
Yeah.
stickers? Don't stop doing that. Anyway, sorry, my own parenting experience is now slowly bleeding into this, but that was my fight last night. Stop eating the stickers, they're gonna choke.
Oh no.
Anyway, yeah,
Yeah.
so
And then
so that
yeah.
that happens a lot. Yeah.
Okay, and then obviously pregnancy seems like that would come with a bunch of horrifying sensory issues. And
Yes, yes, frequently noted, especially when the baby starts kicking. A
oh,
lot
that
of
sounds
them are like,
so horrible. Women get so
yeah,
excited about that. I guess neurotypical, I don't like
yeah.
it sounds
A lot of
nightmarish.
them talk about the movie Alien and
Yeah.
body horror
That's my
of
first
realizing
thought.
something is living inside of you. Yeah, it's a fairly typical thing. I I know a lot of autistic women with children. I don't know a lot of autistic women who enjoyed the infant stage of children.
Okay, yeah,
Oftentimes they're like, after they hit age 2, things got better.
that makes sense.
But we were in the trenches up until that point.
That's rough.
But
That would
yeah,
be my expectation.
yeah, yeah. But like childbirth and child rearing, closely tied to relationships, closely tied to marriage, often doesn't go down well for couples who are both autistic. It tends to be much harder for couples that are both autistic because they're both having simultaneous sensory issues.
Yeah.
Like neither are coping well with the baby screaming. That tends to level out as things go. But yeah,
Okay.
the that's generally speaking how it goes.
Yeah, that makes
So
sense.
I guess the opposite to that are like incels, volcels, and asexuals. It's another set of questions that I got asked about. Yeah, there are a lot of autistic incels. There, if you look at the incel communities and you look at rates of autism, you're gonna get a pretty large overlapping Venn diagram.
Yeah.
Um, in many ways, often deeply unfortunate. A lot of them go down the sort of evopsych pipeline, the evopsych red pill pipeline,
Mhm.
where I mean, I often joke that evopsych is theology for weird atheists, because
I can kind of see that.
a lot of it is just like telling stories that you can't empirically verify and can't actually know. And it's like, why are we like this? Well, evolutionarily, if you think about it, and you basically use evolution to project your feelings onto things. I'm not a fan of evolutionary psychology because I'm an empiricist. I
Fair,
think some
yeah.
of it's valid. I think some of it's
Yeah,
probably right
yeah.
and probably correct, but I think people overinterpret it, and autistic men especially wildly overinterpret it.
I can see that.
It is extremely common for me to talk to young autistic men, especially who are having troubles with women and being like, why am I having troubles with women? And then you look at their post history and it's all evolutionarily, females are developed to do this. And like, if I just use these specific sequences, I can get to do what I need them to do. And it's like, Ooh, not good.
Doesn't
And
seem like it works very well.
no, it doesn't work very well, but they think it should be working well. And because they think it should be working and it's not working, they come to the conclusion that it is actually the women's fault because they
Yes, I've
should be
noticed
responding to this, but they're
that.
not. And this is like the heart of inceldom. It is the like autistic inability to like conceptualize theory of mind for women. Like
I don't get that
autistic,
because,
yeah,
or like when I try to like I don't know, people are always getting into like gender discourse on Twitter, and I'm usually trying to bridge the gap a little bit or whatever, because I used to be more of a misogynist and I like understand women better now and this sort of thing, and I'd like try to communicate this to men who don't understand women. And to do this, think about evolutionary biology, and I'm like, this kind of makes sense. Here's some, and it's just, are they just picking like the worst, most nonsense narratives
yes,
or something? Because I feel like
yes.
there are good narratives that would help you understand women better.
And they are hyper interpreting them. So they are hyper
Mm,
interpreting them and taking them far beyond the logical conclusion that they should be taken to.
okay.
So a lot of this, if you look at a lot of these sort of incel killers, the
Mm,
Elliot Rodgers of the worlds and everything like that, and you
yeah.
read their posting and their manifestos, they're like, look, these are the cheat codes that I'm supposed to be able to use, basically. Like, evolutionary psychology says I need to do this, and I did that, and I need to do this, and I did that. And they look at it like this checklist of things that you do, and at the end of the checklist, you get girlfriend.
Yeah.
And then they go through that checklist and they don't get a girlfriend. And then they keep going through the checklist over and over and over without refining it,
Yeesh.
without testing it, and without the ability to like sort of socially read women
Yeah.
and keep being like, why do I keep failing? This must be the women's fault. And it builds and breeds a lot of resentment in
I
them.
can imagine. Yeah.
And there are great ways to think about things. But the thing that I'm always counseling autistic men who go down these pipelines is to understand that women are a heterogeneous population. that
Yeah.
and
That's a
and
hard one to,
while
to
yeah,
communicate.
yeah, and while many of them will follow similar patterns and trends, not all of them follow the same patterns and trends. And there is no one size fits all solution. There are no silver bullets here.
Mhm.
Everyone has a complex set of motivations, interests, preferences, and your job is to find the ones that line up with yours in a way that complement your own specific sets of preferences, and just recognizing those things is the most important, and then
Yeah.
also treating the person as though they have a brain and they are capable of independent thought.
Oh no.
a lot
Yeah.
of them a lot of them are like, the female will respond like this to things, like the female will only like bad boys, and so I need to be a bad boy. And it's like,
Ooh.
you have autism, you do not know how to pull this off. I'm sorry, every attempt for you to pull off the bad boy shtick is going to come off like a weird uncanny valley effect. You don't need to be the bad boy. You need to be the autistic boy and just find the autistic girl or the girl who likes autistic boys,
Yeah.
and just like I often joke that I'm like, you're you've got the wrong niche. You are going after cheerleaders. You need to be going after weird art girls. The weird art girls will like you. You
Mm.
are the type of girl that the weird art girls go for. And you're an engineer. You've got a salary. You've got all this stuff. You have all these things that none of the other guys in the art world have.
That's true. Is there not a problem where apparently people's politics are increasingly diverging, like the two genders' politics are diverging?
Oh yeah.
And I
Yeah.
expect art girls to have a really hard time with it. It seems like incels tend to be on the conservative side, and vice
Well,
versa. I think
incels are politically incoherent.
okay.
They're not on the conservative side. They're
Mhm.
on the screw women side. They're like on the misogynist side,
Okay,
which
okay.
tends to correlate more with conservatives. But like their politics is more bitterness, resentment, and misogyny than it is like a coherent
Mhm.
understanding of gaining social values or things like that are typically associated with conservatism. But
It's fair, but I
the
guess I don't know, maybe I'm cynical, but I start conceptualize politics as like bitterness and resentment on both sides and then misogyny on one side and misandry on the other. And so it like makes it very hard for them to link up.
Oh yeah, like I mean a lot. So for a lot of guys, they will not be able to mesh with the progressive art women.
Yeah.
However, there are many Christian women who spend their days writing Lord of the Rings fanfic who
Ah, yes.
are like them, but they're just in a different place, and they're not
Mhm.
going to those places. I'm like, you just need to go to these places.
Which places would those be?
Okay, so I was asked this question in a Q&A episode, like, which was like, how do I min-max my
Yeah.
children to be like an autism super soldier that will win the math competitions? It was a guy that asked this, so I said, you need to go to competitive puzzling events, like speed
Oh,
puzzling. Go
yeah.
there. Knitting and fiber
Yeah.
arts communities, those
Okay.
types of places. Like nerd conventions
Yeah,
that
yeah.
have if Brandon Sanderson is at a nerd convention, you need to go there and you will find autistic women who will be there because autistic women love Brandon Sanderson.
Yeah, no, that checks out.
And it's things like that. There
It's
are
really funny.
places, a lot of them are going to the wrong ones, but yeah,
Yeah.
so incels and autism, there is a very large overlap between them.
Yeah.
Yeah, the vol cells, so voluntary celibates, also a lot of autistic people who
Mhm.
just are uninterested, either because they're asexual and just not into relationships, don't want to be in a relationship, and it's like, yep, that makes sense. A lot of them, though, are just like, relationships are very hard, and quite frankly, way too hard for me. I can't manage this, or I don't want to manage this. Another really common one is they were in a string of romantic relationships and then they just got burned by them, and they're like,
Oh,
never again. I am
yeah.
not doing this. This was a mistake. I'm not going to repeat that.
Oh, no.
So that happens quite a bit. But
Mm.
yeah, I don't know what else to really say about asexuals and people who are voluntarily celibate. Do you know what a consecrated virgin is?
I feel like I should know that. I have no idea. No.
In the Catholic Church, there are like various different religious vocations,
Okay.
and a consecrated virgin is a position that you as a woman can take, where you are basically dedicating your life to the church. You're not a priest or something like that, but you
Okay.
often they do like administrative functions for the church. I know quite a few autistic women who are consecrated virgins, religious sisters, or nuns.
Interesting.
Um,
Yeah, that makes sense. I expect
yeah,
just incidences of asexuality are like way higher among autistics than
yes,
neurotypical.
yes. And at a baseline, significantly higher.
Yeah.
There's also so asexuality is really difficult, right? Because there's a joke that is often said that has a kernel of truth to it. It's like, are you asexual or are you just depressed? Um,
Oh,
where
interesting.
where like a lot of people are genuinely asexual and it has nothing to do with
Yeah.
depression or anything like that, but a lot of co-occurring mental health conditions and like the medications for them
Sure.
suppress libido and have those types of effects. So that's also a factor for a lot of autistic people where they were like, I thought I was asexual. Turns out I'm not. um, I was just super depressed for my early 20s. And now that
Huh.
I'm out of that, I am heterosexual.
I would
That's
expect
happened
some
quite a few times.
like a third category of people who it's just don't what is it? It's like you have some degree of alexithymia, so you don't necessarily
Yep.
recognize it when your body is sending horny signals, and then you're like,
Yes.
sex seems like a waste of time. I don't really understand the appeal, or it's like difficult
Yep.
to figure out how to do this. So like, why would I bother?
Yep. And so that's especially common in autistic women. Not
Not
nearly as
surprised.
not nearly as common in autistic men.
Yeah.
It is there in men, but it
There's
is
like clear
also,
signals, I think, for men.
yes, much more clear signals for men. But for a lot of autistic women, a lot of them will talk about how they like didn't develop a sense of sexual attraction until much later in life.
Yeah,
Uh,
that
like
was my
they'll
experience.
yeah, they'll say it took until my early mid 20s
Yeah.
to really start to realize, oh, I am sexually attracted to people. Oh, this makes sense. That is a fairly common thing that I find for autistic women. Not nearly as much for autistic men, but so if you look at the proportion of asexual autistic men to asexual autistic women, they are roughly similar.
Oh, that's
So
interesting.
I haven't found in the data that I've collected a really significant difference between asexual men and asexual women who have autism. It's slightly higher for women, but I think that might just be a sampling size issue. Um,
Interesting. That's a bit surprising. Yeah.
yeah, it could also be that like in Christianity, especially Protestant forms of Christianity, asexuality or like voluntary celibacy isn't a thing,
Mm.
and it's like not to get to second wave feminism on you, but like compulsory heterosexuality, where heterosexuality is like the default mode of being, that you are no matter what. A lot of autistic women learn about that and are like, oh, is that me? Did am I heterosexual by the sheer inertia
Okay,
of
yeah.
the expectations to be heterosexual,
Interesting.
or is something else going on? I just have I already said this episode will be a lot more vibes and not data driven. Wait, this is my most vibes based theory of autism, and especially autistic sexuality. I think that autistic sexuality is fundamentally different from non-autistic sexuality for a few key reasons. I think sexuality develops pretty early on in childhood and childhood development, and the way that autistic people understand the world and have information filtered in the world for them is through a mind that is developing in an autistic way. And that fundamentally shifts the way that autistic sexuality works. I have no way to prove this. Just to be really clear,
Sounds
this is
plausible.
vibes. This
Yeah.
is vibes, and this is my plausible seeming explanation. And so I think just in general, autistic sexuality is very different from autistic or from their non-autistic counterparts. And I found that's really common with autistic men in a way that isn't common with non-autistic men. And so autistic
Oh.
men are often like specifically into weird girls,
Yeah.
and into weird girls in a way that's, I think, statistically significant when compared to the non-autistic population. And I think that's because autistic sexuality might just fundamentally work differently. It's
This
also
seems
why I think
beneficial.
Yeah, it's also why I think there are so many like furries in the autistic
Oh,
community,
okay.
and people who are into that sexually, um, it, and a lot of weird atypical expressions of sexuality. I think the reason you see it so much in autistic communities is because autistic people, like the way that sexuality develops in us, is just fundamentally different. Again, I have no way to prove any of this. This is
God,
vibes. Don't
what if
read too
it's
into this.
what if it's because everybody watched Disney movies as a child and every girl had a crush on Robin Hood or whatever, but most neurotypical women don't grow up continuing to have a crush on Robin Hood, but autism take things very seriously and literally, and it's like this is just correct now.
That is almost certainly a factor.
I guess the other thing I was thinking about was just presumably it's like a lower attachment to your physical, or like a lower association, I guess, with your physical body and
Yep,
more interest in transhumanist type things,
yep,
including, yeah, alien
yep,
stuff, furry stuff, whatever.
yeah, and often particular interest in body modification and
Yeah.
things like that in ways that aren't typical of non-autistic people. Anyway, that's a thing. I don't know what to do with that.
Is there an equivalent to, yeah, okay, so I guess I know, I feel like I know a disproportionate number of autistic guys. It seems like a lot of them are into girls who maybe butch isn't the right word, but it's like not super feminine.
Yep,
I figured this was because they're subtly picking up on there's like higher rates of neurodivergence among this population, and so it just makes sense. But
that
it maybe isn't
very much
completely
could be it.
okay. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if there is there an equivalent for autistic women being into certain things or not into certain things.
Um, yes. So one of the jokes that I typically make is that for the average autistic woman, the ideal man is a gay man who is, for some inexplicable reason, still sexually attracted to them. Where there is like a certain type of like fancy boy
Uh-huh.
is what they're super into. Still
Wait,
heterosexual, like still
yeah.
into them, but like, you know, a slightly gay man who's still heterosexual is often what autistic women are into.
I do hear the girls talk about liking guys who are, I quote, a little fruity, and I don't know if that's the
Yeah.
type of thing. Is it
Or
a
like
little bit of a
twinkish.
boys? Yeah, I can imagine the appearance thing. I can assume that autistic people tend to be drawn to people who look like young for their age or something, not in like a, I guess, creepy way, but in just sort of like this person looks sort of like innocent, or I don't know how to,
Yeah.
but it's like autistic people tend to look young for their age, and so I don't know if it's just like we're finding our
Yeah.
own, or if there's some kind of like fear around this person looks too normal and adult and alien or something.
Yeah, I have no idea. I have no idea what it is or why. I've just noticed the pattern that autistic women tend to prefer Like their ideal is like a slightly gay twinkish boy who
That's
who
so
is
funny.
who is still into them, and that typically who they will point out as being a good catch is that.
Okay.
The other option is a very, so this might go into your theory as being correct more, because the other option that's very common are like the sort of traditional stoic, reserved, dark and mysterious type of man, like
Oh,
the Mr.
okay.
Darcy's of
Yeah,
the world.
that's
Like
funny.
that
Okay.
type of thing is also very common, and that's like super autism coded. And
Well,
so it's
oh,
like
yeah, being like
is
that
that,
is.
yeah, and so is this just them recognizing, like subconsciously recognizing autism traits and just looking for those?
That's my
Uh,
assumption.
but there
I think.
also could be factors of, I don't know if this is true, but people will tend to, if they have good relationships with their parents, tend to look for partners who have qualities similar to that of their parents.
Oh
If
yeah.
you're autistic, the chances that you have an autistic parent are quite high. maybe
Yeah. No, that's
maybe that's
true.
an effect.
That's
I don't know
funny.
what's going on. I Yeah.
I go. I never get it when women are into guys who seem gay, but I go for, how do you pronounce it? Cherubic types, like guys who look like angel, like just like sweet looking.
Yes.
Yeah, which feels like it's maybe a subset or related to this thing, if it's not
Yes,
quite.
it does, it does.
That's
Yeah,
really
I get
funny.
what you're saying. And I would put in
The gay men who
the
are
sort of,
straight.
yeah, or like a non-traditional
Yeah.
presentation.
Yeah,
Um
yeah.
typically autistic people tend to be into non-traditional presentations
That makes
of
sense.
of
I got
um
so much shit for that when growing up. Women are savage. One of actually no, men are savage. One of my friends told me that I liked men who wouldn't do well in evolution, and another one told me that I liked a guy friend told me I liked limping antelopes.
Yep, that is a common thing for autistic women to be into.
Checks out.
Yeah,
God.
that doesn't surprise me at all. I think it might just be like we tend to recognize that we're also not part of the in group.
Yeah.
So people who are explicitly signaling through their looks that they're also not part of that group, we just go, ah, yes, fellow outsider.
Yeah, I think that's it.
let's meet.
Have you noticed? I guess I don't know how many interviews you've done with people like across time, but I guess this would work with different age brackets. I guess they're all pretty young, so maybe there's not a clear effect. But have you noticed whether autistic women's preferences for men change, like early 20s versus like later 20s or early 30s?
Yeah, so I have no idea.
Okay.
That's one I don't know a whole lot about. I would expect them to change. I would expect as you get older to start looking for traits that are typically associated with people with higher maturity levels. Um, as
There's,
as you get older, but I don't know.
I think specifically a thing that I've noticed with women in general is that it seems pretty common when you're like a teenager or in your early 20s to be really into like really like rail thin, like heroin addict type guys or
Yeah,
like twinks and this type of thing. And then once you hit like your mid late 20s, then all of a sudden you're more into like guys that are muscular or like dad bod or whatever. Like this sort of, it feels like there's a pretty standard shift, which I imagine probably still happens with autistic women commonly, but
probably.
yeah.
However, most of the autistic women over the age of 30, I've interviewed quite
Yeah.
a few over the age of 30 and in their late 20s, and they still tend to be interested in the
Nice.
sort of
Bishonen.
outliers
Yeah, yeah.
and slightly gay men who are nevertheless heterosexual.
That's
Um,
funny.
yeah, yeah. So
Interesting.
that's the general preferences. Personality type, the general preferences for autistic people. So autistic people tend to prefer other autistic people in as friends, and that extends to relationships. So the you will have your best chance in finding a potential partner in places that you tend to find other autistic people, because autistic people tend to like other autistic people more than they like others people. And
Makes
so
sense.
just generally speaking, while autistic non-autistic relationships are very possible, and I speak as living proof of that, in general autistic people will tend to find and date other autistic people if they can and if they're available. It shouldn't be as high as, like, men should not be in relationships with autistic people at a rate of 20% and women at like 40-ish 44%, because we're 2 to 3% of the population. Like
Mhm.
those numbers are wildly skewed.
Yeah.
And I think all that shows is just like autistic people just have a really strong preference for other autistic people, and that for women, for autistic women, finding autistic men is much easier. We tend to be more concentrated in
Yeah.
certain
Not
places.
hard to find.
Yeah, much easier to find than your average autistic woman is. But yeah, that's. I got a bunch of questions about relationship patterns between straight and gay
Ooh,
couples
okay.
and things like that. It is a wild ride. Autistic lesbian stories are some of the most deranged and unhinged stories that I've heard, especially autistic Christian lesbians.
Okay.
Just like off the wall bonkers. In terms of, I rarely meet normal ones, to put it mildly. Yeah. So a really common trend just with autistic women in general is their late teens, early 20s are just filled with strings of really bad relationships.
Interesting. Okay.
It is very common for them to get into really bad relationships and bad relationships with toxic people. I think that's because they just don't have the internal ability to recognize red flags
Yeah.
that other women do. And so as a result, tend to be overly trusting, overly naive, and tend to get mixed up with abusive and bad people.
Mm.
Autistic women who get in abusive relationships are significantly more common than autistic men who get into abusive relationships.
Interesting.
Often for a pretty simple reason, I think, and it has to do with the dynamics of heterosexuality. So men pursue and women are pursued. And if you are a naive and vulnerable man, you just won't get into
Yeah,
a
that's fair.
relationship, right?
Yeah.
You won't get into that position. But if you're a naive and vulnerable woman, men are going to pursue you,
Yeah.
and a lot of times those men are abusive narcissists who autistic women don't realize are abusive narcissists
Mm.
because they don't have the ability to tell, and then they
Yep.
get bogged down in very bad relationships. And it is very common to talk to
Mm.
an autistic person and they're like, yeah, my string of relationships in my early 20s was just a giant mess. Oftentimes you will get autistic women who, not to talk about the problematic age gap discourse, but who get into problematic age gaps from a
I
very
can see
young
that.
age
Yeah.
because they're looking for men who are more emotionally mature, and so they'll start dating like a 32-year-old when they're 19 and not realizing why that's typically why most 32-year-old men don't date 19-year-olds, and the type of 32-year-old men who date 19-year-olds probably aren't the ones who should be. um yeah, so that happens a lot. They're just overall tend to be more risks for women in relationships than they do men. So another really, really common pattern: autistic men, some of the most efficient daters known to mankind. They will have one girlfriend and marry
Mm.
her.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Hell yeah.
it is super common, and this is, I mean, I'm in this category. Many of my autistic friends are in this category, where they're an autistic guy in university, an autist or a non-autistic woman, like someone like my wife who's a nursing student who kind of likes weird guys, finds him and goes, this guy has huge amounts of potential. I'm gonna jump on him early. And the guy's, yeah, sounds good, I guess this is what we're doing. And so it is really common in those like engineer nurse pairs or engineer elementary school teacher pairs, or for the guy to only have dated one girl, and that
Oh,
one girl to be his wife.
that's wild.
Yeah, it's just, it happens so often that I'm like, this is weird, and I don't see this in non-autistic people, where like non-autistic people have strings of relationships like
Yeah.
normal people.
Right.
But then for these particular, I joke that we're efficient, but it is typically like they're just like, I found a good one, I'm gonna stick with this, why would I leave?
I can see this.
It's
Yeah.
it's very easy to seduce many autistic men. So
I have
like
found that.
if you are a woman who's seeking an autistic man, offer to book his dentist appointment, and he'll be like, "We should get married,"
I gotta write
or
that down.
organize his social life, build him a calendar,
I feel
and
so
like
called out right now.
and just start managing his life for him.
Yeah, yeah.
He will immediately, he'll be like, "Oh, okay, this is what I'm doing."
No, that
And
is my experience.
it is one of like the easiest group of men to court if you have those abilities and you have that foresight. Like the easiest way to get into a relationship with an autistic man is to be just like, "Look, I'm now here and I'm going to start organizing your life for you, and you're just going with it and it'll be fine." And then they're like, "Wow, I guess I have a girlfriend now."
I'm not even sure if you have to go as far as to organize things for them, but you just show up. You're like, I like you, and
Yep.
then that's
Yep,
pretty
we're
much you're
doing
good.
this.
Yeah,
Yep.
that.
Yep.
I did this to my boyfriend, and I didn't realize that when I told him that I liked him, and then he told me that he liked me, that this meant that we were a couple. Until 2 weeks
Mm.
later, when he called me his girlfriend, and I was like, "Oh, are we, official now?" And he's like, "Have we not been for the last 2 weeks?"
The way I asked my wife if she wanted to start dating was I gave her a talk about how over the past year we have been Skyping like an hour every day, and that the amount that we communicate is irregular for anyone other than a couple already in a relationship. And I was like, statistically speaking, we are already dating, so we should just make it official.
Hell yeah.
And she was like, "Yes," which I like look back and I'm like, wow, that is like such an unromantic thing to say.
No, it's so
Such a terrible
romantic.
way to do it. And I'm like, this is like such a selection bias effect. Like the type of woman who would be okay with that is the type of woman who would be willing to date an autistic man.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
Oh God, that's so cute.
yeah, yeah. A really big thing that I found is autistic people abhor spontaneity in relationships. So grand romantic gestures, not really. Surprise romantic gestures, not really. They like to talk it out and plan things. So like, my wife was a saint for this, but like it's like, okay, we are getting engaged on this day. We're going to go to the store. We're going to pick out a ring you like, and we're just going to buy that ring. And
That's what you told her.
yes.
Nice.
And
Okay.
we did that. We went
Great.
ring shopping together. She's like, "I want that ring," and it was like $280. And so I was like,
Perfect.
"Yes, no complaints. Let's get this." And then I was like, "Okay, once I graduate from RMC, you'll come down, and then we'll get engaged, and then we'll get married a year later once you finish your nursing school." And that was it.
Nice.
That was we tend to be very efficient and prefer efficiency over romance.
Mhm.
And like romantic gestures, a very common sentiment that you hear. We've already talked about small weddings, but a very common sentiment is, why have a big wedding when we can spend that money to like go on vacation or buy
Yeah.
a car or something like that,
Oh, totally.
or put it toward down payment to the. This seems stupid. I shouldn't need to spend money on explaining that to my wife that I love her.
I'm pretty sure my mom's autistic because like the only real piece of romantic advice she's ever given me is like elope.
Yes.
Like she doesn't want to have to go to a wedding. I'm sure she would if I asked her, but I don't think she's excited about it. That's looking pretty likely.
Yep. So that's another really common that you see is just a sort of disinterest in romantic spontaneity. This often with non-autistic is in the autistic man, non-autistic wife pairings tends to cause tension
I
where
can
the
imagine.
non-autistic wife wants grand romantic gestures and he straight up doesn't understand it. Luckily, I don't have that problem. My wife is absolutely not that. She's like, the grand romantic gesture I want is a KitchenAid stand mixer.
Are you sure she's not autistic?
I'm very sure she's not autistic. We've tested. She gets unbelievably low scores
Whoa.
on autism screeners. Like, scores so low, it's like, did you actually answer these questions? How did you get 30 on the RADS-R? This should not be possible. Yeah, so that's typically romance and romantic preferences that you find. Autistic gay men tend to date other autistic gay men. A lot of so that's one of the instances is which it's much more common for autistic gay men to be dating other autistic gay men than it is for autistic straight men to be dating autistic women. Just tends to be more prevalent. Not sure why that is. I think it might have something to do with incidences and like meeting and culture and things like that, where if you're autistic and gay and Christian, you're probably going to be in the places where other autistic gay Christians are, and not necessarily
furry conventions. Like, where is that?
Like furry conventions or Anglo-Catholic meetings.
Okay.
Anglo-Catholicism, by the way, is notorious for being gay. The joke.
Wait, really?
Yeah. So Anglo-Catholics are a type of Anglican. And the joke is there are 3 types of Anglo-Catholics. One faction are the British loyalists, the other are the conservatives, and then the third are the gays.
That's amazing. Why is that?
I don't. It's just the way Anglo-Catholicism is. It's like the high church, high liturgy, very known for its choral traditions and also lace and ceremony. And
sounds great.
Yeah,
so it's coming up.
It's if the theater kids were if the autistic theater kids were to have a denomination, it would be the Anglo-Catholics. And so I guess that's just where you find it's where I find a lot of gay autistic men is in the Anglo-Catholic Church.
Okay, noted.
Yeah, so I think just within the populations I study, there's just a much higher mingling of autistic gay men together than there is with autistic heterosexual pairings. Yeah, so those are, I think, the biggest differences that I've noticed. Other than that, couple types tend to be pretty similar. Like, relationship dynamics tend to be pretty similar across heterosexual and gay couples. For autistic couples, particularly, they don't follow typical conventions, and they tend to be default meritocratic egalitarian in the way that they do things. The only difference is one tends to have kids and one tends to not, for obvious reasons. Yeah. So those are all the sort of big topic questions I got asked about. Do you have any other topics you were wondering about?
Yeah. Okay, wait, you mentioned autistic Christian lesbians being nuts. Like, what type of nuts are we talking about?
Oh, nuts in the fact that they often have extremely messy relationships and then extremely messy breakups that like blast through the autism communities that they're in. And yeah, there tends to be a lot of drama in them. And talking to autistic lesbians, them in the church, them going through like their dating history, like, oh, that was with my abusive psychotic ex and had a lot of mental disturbances and then had to be committed to a psych ward. And then I moved on to dating another lesbian who decided that she was going to become a nun. And then I dated one who then became ex-gay, and then after she had her ex-gay phase, she went back to being gay. Just not with me. And it's just like these insane lore drops that you get from these people about their wild strings of relationships is pretty common. And it's just, there seems to be just a much higher incidence of mental health issues with these communities. I don't know why. Within the autism communities, though, those tend to be the ones that I hear the most like insane stories about. Again, this is vibes-based, not numbers-based, but just having talked to them, when I talk to them, I always know, oh, this is going to be a wild ride.
Okay, yeah. And then is the number of trans autistic Christians just too small, or does this get factored into a bunch of the other things you've been talking about?
So this gets factored into a bunch of the other things I've
Okay.
been talking about. It is a very small population. It is a fairly substantial population within the autism, like
Yeah.
within autistic people. Just because autistic people are disproportionately trans. In fact, most autistic, or I would say most trans autistics, probably have some of the tism going on.
Or wait, most trans people have some of this isn't going on?
Most trans people who are still Christians.
Oh, trans Christians. Got it. Okay.
Yes,
Yeah. Oh,
probably
interesting.
have a little bit of something going on.
Like more so, you would say, than
I
the
would say probably more so because, like,
wow.
what kind of trans person would want to stay in Christianity?
Yeah. Someone's committed to following the rules? Like,
Yeah, someone who's super into it in an
yeah.
autistic
Okay.
way. So yeah,
Interesting.
there are lots of trends that come out of this. Trans men tend to typically be celibate and asexual. It's fairly common for them to be celibate and asexual if they're within Christianity. Trans women are all across the board. I built a machine learning algorithm based on the profiles, like the Twitter profiles of trans autistic women that I found and cis autistic women that I found, in order to basically just be like, okay, here's a whole bunch of posts from all these people, here are a whole bunch of posts from all these people, and then categorize people for me based on this. And one thing that I found, and these are on Christian populations, by the way, is that autistic trans women really like publicly talking about sex in a way that cis women do not, especially cis Christian women. It is very different. And maybe these cis women have conversations in private, but they certainly do not horny post to the extent that cis Christian women do.
Yeah, I don't think this is just Christian women.
Yeah, no,
I think this is just generally true. Yeah.
I think this is just generally true. I will not speculate as to why that is, but basically one of the things that algorithm spit out is that it would false positive classify autistic women who were escorts or things like that as trans women.
Yep.
Because of the amount of like sort of nudity and lewd posting they would make. And then I started realizing that algorithm that I had trained wasn't actually classifying trans and cis women. It was just looking for people posting lewd stuff and sexually explicit stuff.
So funny, holy shit.
And so, like, you know, those patterns hold for autistic women.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so autistic trans women disproportionately more likely to be poly than autistic Christian cis women, disproportionately likely to disregard Christian sexual ethics when compared to cis women, disproportionately more likely to like horny post on main, and things like that than when you look at cis women. And this often causes trans women a lot of issues within Christian communities because these cis women aren't into that and respond very negatively to women who post sexually explicit things because they're like, you are posting something that's sexually explicit and you're trans. I know why you did that. You're a man.
God. Oh no.
So I have previously talked about like the autistic Christian woman to turf pipeline, and that is frequently cited.
That's part of it. Yeah. Oh god.
That is frequently cited in their perception of trans women as being hypersexual because their interactions with them online are often mediated through these filters. I once made a collage, and I had to not make the collage. Well, I mean, I still made the collages of just like grabbing images of urine posting. So scraping a whole bunch of autistic Christian women's profiles and then using machine learning and sentiment analysis to basically say, is this person yearning? Is this person expressing some sort of sexual desire or relational desire? And then if there was a photo attached to it, just pull out the photo.
Yeah.
And so I made a collage of these, and
That
then
sounds incredible.
yeah, so looking at the cis one, it's Pride and Prejudice,
Yeah.
Pirates of the Caribbean,
Oh boy. Okay, yeah.
Lord of the Rings, and it's just pictures of mostly men with wet hair and swords.
What hair is really
Basically,
funny. Okay,
yeah,
yeah.
just it's just collections of men in fantasy settings with swords looking regal and authoritarian in a sense. And then in on the trans women's side, it was just like a lot of porn.
Or just like all kinds of porn.
All
Okay.
kinds, just all across the board, often drawn, but
Hmm.
like explicitly sexual in a way that is not typical of cisgender autistic women in
Yeah.
Christianity. Their sexual expression is extremely muted and very tame.
Yeah, I think the difference is even noticeable among non-Christian
Yeah,
populations, just anecdotally. But
yeah. Oh, anecdotally, it definitely is, but I don't know.
yeah,
But in general, that's basically one of the big differences.
interesting. Oh God. Oh wait, you mentioned poly. Like a lot of the
Yeah,
trans women are poly. Trans Christian women are often poly. What's
yeah.
the like poly status in like Christianity? That seems like that'd be a very small population. Or
Yes, very small
okay,
population. Pretty much exclusively queer Christians. So
okay,
people who call themselves queer and call themselves Christian, those groups are the most likely to also identify as poly. Outside of that, virtually non-existent.
yeah. Do they tend to gravitate towards a specific flavor of poly? Because I understand there's like a bunch of different.
I don't know.
Okay,
This is
I guess
basically
yeah.
this is from like data scraping tags in people's bios,
Okay,
and looking if they say like poly, or they
okay,
have
yeah,
an emoji representing being poly.
that makes sense.
Yeah. So
Um,
I'm not sure what kinds, but I just know from having done that, they're the only people who say Christian and poly tend to be either very left progressive
mm,
Christians, or ones who call themselves queer.
oh, that makes sense. Do you have any data on like divorce rates and this type of thing among autistics?
Yeah, so divorce rates are pretty high in the populations that I sample. They are much higher pre-diagnosis than post-diagnosis. So
Oh,
if you
yeah,
already know you're autistic, divorce rates are much lower. Um, and yeah, like a lot of the divorces happen for reasons related to autism.
okay,
Um,
yeah, I buy
I
that.
so if you look at like general population statistics, it's like 15% higher. In the populations that I've looked at, it's 15% more common
Wow,
than it
that's
is
pretty
for
significant.
yeah, and it's even more significant because divorce is highly discouraged in
Yeah,
Christianity. So
right.
if it wasn't for the factor of Christianity, I suspect it might be higher. Yeah, it tends to be pretty high in, or it tends to be much higher in autistic non-autistic pairings than in
Yeah,
autistic pairings. However, it's still at around the rate of, like, it's still higher, it's still like slightly higher than the base population rate for autistic pairings. um yeah, I haven't noticed any specific trends other than it tends to be more common in autistic non-autistic couples, and post pre-diagnosis is like a fairly big deal. But the good news is post diagnosis it tends to go back down to normal.
oh, okay,
So
very
if you
nice.
already know you're autistic, the divorce rate seems to be closer to the general population.
What
Yeah,
about the cheating rate?
I have no idea.
Okay,
No idea what the cheating rate is.
I have suspected to be a lot lower somehow.
Yeah,
Maybe I'm
so
just being biased though.
I have not talked to many autistic people who cheated, who admitted to cheating on their spouse.
Yeah,
The difficulty is with cheating, it's like, how do you
yeah,
know they're not just lying to you, right? Because that would be something you would lie about. That's not something you would openly admit. But
yeah,
if you look at couples where there are autistic pairings and the one person says my autistic spouse cheated on me, I don't find a lot of that.
okay,
um
interesting.
I
Yeah,
don't find a lot of people. And if you look divorce stories for autism, and like I went through a period where I just basically scraped forums for like relationship advice
oh
and
wow,
forums and stuff like that, and just pulled out like autism and divorce stuff. and stuff related to autism and divorce. And cheating was rarely mentioned in those.
Interesting.
I don't know. I suspect it's probably low, but I really don't know. Because, like, looking through divorce forums and, like, relationship advice forums, specifically for cheating, is not going to get you, like, representative sample sets of anything. It's going to give you a highly selected, survivorship biased portion of things. And so you should probably not, like, probably not base findings off of that. But, yeah, I don't know. Vibes, going off purely vibes, I suspect it would be lower, but that's just a guess.
Okay, yeah. Okay, and then what about, so you said that the turnaround time between like meeting and marriage is, or I guess the turnaround time between starting to date and getting married tends to be shorter with autistics or autistic Christians than non-autistic ones. But like, what about the time between like meeting and starting to date? Does that vary?
Yes, so that really depends on how you meet in college.
Okay, yeah.
So if you look at stories from people meeting in college, what I typically find is that they were all in the same friend group, and then basically by sheer incidents they started dating.
Nice.
I know one autistic who I pretty regularly talk to, and she said her and her husband started dating because her friend group would hang out a lot, and then they just sometimes wouldn't show up, and her now husband would be the only two people there, and that just happened a bunch, and then that's how they started dating. That sort of story happens a lot with autistic people, but because so many meet online and often meet online with the intention to date, not sure what the numbers on that would be, or if that would be a particularly representative sample, but time from dating to meeting. So with my wife and I, it was like 3 years.
Oh, damn.
Yeah.
Oh, but you met in high school too, so.
Yeah, but we basically really liked each other pretty much from day one. But neither of us thought the other one liked each other because I couldn't read her and she couldn't read me.
Yeah.
And so we both mutually really liked each other, but I was too autistic to read her. And I was also too autistic to be read by her. And so neither of us knew we liked each other until I said we should start dating, because statistically we already are. And then once we cross that barrier, it's like, yeah, I kind of liked you for a bit in high school. And she was like, me too. And then I was like, okay, I lied about a bit. It was the entire time. She was like, oh, wow, me too.
That's so really cute.
But yeah, so I suspect that for friend group dating, the time would probably be longer for knowing each other than it would for typical groups, just because a lot of autistic people I talk to who started dating from within their friend group started dating from within their friend group through sheer coincidence and incidents.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now I'm curious if it's common for autists to fall for each other quickly, but have the same problem that you had, or if it's more of a thing where it's like it's just not on their radar for a while, and then eventually they're like, this person's here, I like them.
Yeah, so I suspect that it is very common for there to be mutual yearning and no one doing anything about it. Because So a really common thing, especially for autistic men, is you're expected to make the first move.
Yeah.
You misread someone's signals. Disaster.
Yeah.
So you being autistic have a really poor understanding of the social signals she's giving off. You think she's giving off good ones. She's not giving off good ones. You make a move. Disaster strikes. Happens all the time. And so then your like internal algorithm just errs on the side of conservative every single time, and just errs on the side of it's, if she doesn't like me and I try this, disaster. If she does like me and I try this, success. But the chance of disaster is way higher than the chance of success. So I'm just not going to do anything until I can collect more data and be really sure. So I suspect that mutual admiration and yearning period is quite high. I suspect. Okay. I don't know, though.
No, I buy that. Yeah, so it seems like if you want an autistic man, you should just pick him up and take him away.
Yes, that is the takeaway from this episode. If you are pursuing an autistic man, just tell him that you're dating now, and it will pretty much just work.
And it's possible you'll have to be that explicit about it, because if you're more subtle, it won't.
Yes,
it won't register.
So that's another thing.
Oh, that
Autistic
explains a lot.
people are like renowned for not picking up relationship cues.
Yeah.
Uh, Before I was dating my wife, there were apparently many girls who were very interested in me. I had no idea.
Yeah.
It never crossed my mind. My sister met one of the girls I went to high school with who described me as the one that got away. And I was like, what?
Wow.
What? No, we were just in math class together. Like, what are you talking about?
So funny. She
Anyway,
felt a connection.
yeah,
Yeah, I've got some horror stories as well of just
yeah,
being completely oblivious to shit or not even like registering that it's like this, there's no way to misinterpret this signal. However, mitigating circumstances mean it has to mean something else.
yeah.
Just
So
no.
that's extremely common.
Yeah.
So extremely common thing
Mhm.
to happen. There's like a frequent joke that I make about a lot of autistic women where they're like their flirting strategy is just staring at a guy
Yep.
until and then when he looks at you looking away
Yep.
and just hoping that by the sheer power of telepathy he will
Yeah.
get the hint even
I
though you're
tried that for
giving
a
no
while.
signals. But also just a lot of autistic men will have huge numbers of stories about how a girl was really into them and they had no idea, and just not even like, I thought she might be. It was just I didn't even know this was on the tape. I had no idea she was flirting with me the entire time.
I buy it.
It's happened to me a few times where meeting women in friend groups and they don't realize in a church small group meeting other women and they don't realize that I'm married to my wife, and then my wife has to tell me that she's giving you signals and I'm like, she's not. No, that doesn't
Oh
make any
no.
sense. It's like, no, it's happening, you just don't know because you're autistic.
God, that's so funny.
Yeah, so I suspect that obliviousness and then the erring on the side of being conservative because of so many missed opportunities, and then the autistic women also not knowing how to drop hints just leads to a much longer, prolonged friend stage than probably the people would like.
I believe that. Oh god, I bet there's also I spent a lot of time trying to figure out why I had such a hard time dating until suddenly I had a very easy time dating. And I think maybe what was going on was like once I got to the point where I could tell that guy was maybe into me, or that once I got like we're having a first date or there's clearly something directionally happening, things would always fall apart. And I suspect what's happening is I didn't realize you had to like you couldn't keep pretending you didn't like them, maybe is the thing.
Yeah.
Like you have to keep sending clear signals. I think even if they're not autistic, and maybe I don't know, not especially if they're not autistic, but if they're not autistic, they're still going to be like confused. Like they're looking for certain things, and if you're not giving them
Yes.
that, they're going to be like, "This
Yes.
isn't a date."
It is especially common for autistic Christian women because of dating culture. So there was
Oh,
this book that sort of like wrecked the psyche of a million evangelical women
oh
called
no!
I Kiss Dating Goodbye. Um and the book is about how you shouldn't date. And do you know the meme about like premarital hand holding?
No,
Okay.
what?
Okay, so there's a joke about in a lot of conservative evangelical circles, kissing before marriage is seen as like bad. So it's not even premarital
Really?
sex, it's
I would have
premarital
done
kissing.
so well as an evangelical in high school. Holy
You
shit!
missed your calling.
Apparently.
Yeah, and it all stems from this really terrible dating advice book called
Oh,
I Kiss Dating Goodbye, which has this scene in it where a woman is at her wedding day, and when she's walking down the aisle, she sees her husband and all the other boys she's kissed lined up
god damn
behind her
it!
husband. And especially when you talk to like autistic women, these things have planted in their mind that they can't show any sign of affection towards a man lest they be secretly cheating on their future husband.
Mhm. I could totally imagine that. Actually, that's fucked up.
And they don't learn to shut this off.
Oh no. Yeah.
You train yourself your entire life to not give off signals to men that you find them attractive, and then now that you're dating one, how do you just snap and turn that back on?
You're
Or
right.
there are lots of studies about specific sexual dysfunction and disorders within women and just in general in evangelical women are significantly higher rates of vaginismus
Damn.
within evangelical women
Mhm.
when compared to non-evangelical women, mostly because of programming that you get from a very young age to be like purity culture is
Yeah.
the be all and end all. And you don't shut that switch off the moment you get married. And it often has pretty significant psychological impacts on women, and especially autistic women. They take their religion very seriously.
Sure.
And they're really into it, and they are the true believers who
Yeah.
do all the things, and it tends to have some pretty negative side effects.
That
However,
makes so much sense.
there are also autistic women who read the purity culture stuff and overly interpret it. So one story that I love, I think it's so funny, is this woman went to youth group and she heard the story about how every time you date a boy, you're like a rose, and every time you date a boy or kiss a boy, a petal gets plucked off the rose.
Wow.
And then she went home, found a rose in the garden, and started plucking off petals and was like, okay, I can date about 14 boys before anyone else will know.
Holy shit. That's so based.
Yes. Queen.
Oh, yes.
Love it. Love that
Oh my
for her.
God.
Yeah, but like, so there are a lot of metaphors in evangelical dating culture. You know, if you kiss someone, it's like you're chewed up gum, and you wouldn't want to chew gum that someone else has already chewed, right? And there are a lot of metaphors as the woman being like a disposable thing that gets corrupted by men.
Jesus.
And like sexually corrupted by contact with men, basically.
Holy shit.
And that they need to stay pure and guard their heart. Do you know like purity balls are and stuff like that?
Purity balls? Is this like
Yeah.
a dance?
Yeah, it's like a thing that evangelical men would take their daughters to, where their daughters like pledge that they're going to stay a virgin until they're married to their father
Okay.
at this thing. Very weird.
That is
Very
very weird.
Very
Not
not
into that.
normal. Not into that. Yeah, to put it mildly, not into that.
Jesus Christ.
But yeah, yes. Appropriate wording for that.
Yeah.
It is very much not good. Those types of messages tend to get taken very seriously by autistic women and internalized in a way that often has pretty negative, deleterious effects on them and the way they view sex and sexuality. Yeah, so that often has a pretty big effect. But then there are also autistic Christian women sex autists. Listeners to the podcast are probably already familiar with Ayla. I probably don't need to explain who she is. But for those who don't, she's an autistic woman who does lots of surveys about sex and sexuality and does a lot of sex research and then posts a lot about it on Twitter in a way that sometimes upsets people. Anyway, she's very obviously an autistic woman. And
explain that to some of her haters.
Yes. And we have a uncritical, supportive stance on this podcast towards Ayla.
In this house.
Yes, in this
pro
house.
Ayla.
We are not pro Ayla in that we endorse the positions Ayla endorses, but we endorse her right to be a weird autistic woman on the internet, and she should not be impeded for being a weird autistic woman on the internet. That is the official stance of this podcast, and having also read the deep lore of her upbringing. She is technically one of the people that belong to our really niche subset. And so anyway, there are autistic Christian women equivalents of Ayla. They are really interested in sex, but they aren't interested in sex and having it. They're interested in it like Jane Goodall observing the apes, like in thinking about it and like analyzing it and thinking about the consequences of it, which I always find very funny. So I have a joke that like there are a lot of autistic Christian women who express interest in BDSM without any of the B, the D, the S, or the N. They just really like the idea of planning and preparing and then executing the plan.
I can imagine this.
Yeah, they're just like, wow, so you guys like think about what you want to do and then you plan it and then you talk about what you're going to do at each step and then you That sounds great. We should do that. I'm not really interested in the like the masochism part of it, but planning.
Right.
I love a good spreadsheet. There have been many phenomena where a lot of autistic women who are interested in sex will track things in a spreadsheet. And I once had to explain to a non-autistic husband of an autistic woman that this was a normal thing, because he found it and he was like, wow, this is terrible.
What sorts of things are we talking about? Like number of orgasms and like types of acts and stuff like this?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
okay.
and just like recording it and then taking
Sure.
notes and being like, didn't like that.
A journal.
Yeah, like a sex journal,
Okay.
basically.
That seems normal.
Yeah, seems you probably would think that's normal.
Surprisingly, I have not done it, but it just sounds. I'm sad I didn't think of it.
It makes sense to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
When I talk to a lot of autistic women, they're like, wow, yeah, that does seem like a good thing to do. Because I bring it up to be like, isn't this an odd thing? And they're like, no, that's actually really smart. I should do that.
Let me go buy a notebook.
Yes. And so that happens a lot, where thinking about documenting and then analyzing tends to be a fairly large of autistic Christian women's sexuality. I have been sent... many of these women offer to send me their journals, and I'm like, naturally, I don't want to see your sex journal.
But for the data.
Yeah, but they're like, but for data collection purposes, I'm like, I don't collect data on this. This is not an area of research that I have.
You should tell them to send their journals to Ayla. I bet she'd be very interested.
I was like, you should tell me the categories and what types of data that you record. I don't need to know any of the specifics. And so, yes, that's been an adventure, but happens far more frequently than you would think, and have not seen non-autistic women talk about journaling.
Fair. I guess journaling is pretty, like, feminine coded, but I guess I'm a little surprised if this isn't a thing about, like, for men, just because it seems like getting a woman off is more difficult than getting a man off, and so there's a lot more to be thinking about there and to be, like, gaming out.
I have no idea. I have never had a man volunteer this information to me. I've had several women volunteer this information to me.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyway, that's that. Any other questions?
Okay, yeah, this is completely unrelated to any of this. I don't think we really talked about dating apps at all. I imagine that autistics just have a bad time on those, like, relative
overall,
to the population.
Terrible time. These things are cursed and sent from hell is the typical expression.
It's weird because you think it'd be a quick way to find other autistics, but I guess there aren't very many trying.
Many of them don't. Many of them don't have the social awareness to know what they're supposed to say and how they're supposed to say it.
Oh, and I guess to some extent are still put off by the same sorts of things neurotypicals would be.
Yeah, and the way that dating apps work, they're very superficial first look, and autists tend to be an acquired taste. Yeah. Some people will not look at an autist and be like, I definitely want that. But after a while, you might be like, I could see myself wanting that. Dating apps don't lend themselves well to that sort of acquired taste mentality that a lot of autistic people need. And so often not a whole lot of success with them.
Have you heard about that autistic dating app?
No.
I think it's called like Hiki. Is that what it is? I should look it up. I assumed it was a play on hikikomori, which is maybe mildly insulting, but valid. Yeah, it's an autism, ADHD, neurodivergent community. Oh, friendship and love, apparently. Actually, maybe I should get on there to find friends out here. Yeah,
sounds
I don't know.
Sounds like something RFK should shut down to stop the rates of autism climbing.
Holy shit, you're right. Oh my god.
We should get him on the case.
So funny. Yeah, I'm curious whether, like, God, I want their data. I want to know what's going on with them. I don't know. Maybe they'll start releasing stuff. I think they're relatively new, but yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. That's everything that I've got written down.
Cool.
But...
Awesome. We can just end it here. So
all right.
I'm John. You can find me at christianityonthespectrum@gmail.com. You can find me on Twitter at ChristianityOn, and you can find me on Blue Sky at christianityon.bluesky.social. We have a Discord. If you want to join our Discord, you can send me a message and I'll send you a link to it. That's about it. Anything from you?
I guess you could find me on Twitter at Goblin Odds. GOBLINODDS. And on
Cool.
YouTube, at Odds of Affection.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll end it here.